Why older people wake up at 3 a.m. Stoicism, the Stoic psychology. If you are over 60 and you wake up at 3 a.m., your body is not failing you. It is finally telling you the truth. Not the comfortable truth. Not the reassuring truth that fits neatly into the narrative of decline that our culture uses to explain everything that happens to the aging body and the aging mind. The real truth. The one that the Stoics understood with extraordinary clarity and that modern science is only now beginning to catch up to. The truth that the 3 a.m. waking of the older person is not a malfunction. It is not a symptom of something broken. It is one of the most philosophically significant experiences available to a human being who has lived long enough to have something real to wake up to. Today we are going inside this experience, not as a medical phenomenon, though the biology is real and we will honor it, but as a Stoic psychological phenomenon, as one of the most important and most consistently misunderstood signals that the aging human mind and body generate. And by the time this video ends, if you are someone who wakes at 3 a.m., or if you love someone who does, you will never look at that waking the same way again. If you are new to this channel, welcome. We explore Stoic philosophy and human psychology and bring both directly into the real texture of your life. This video is especially for those of you who have lived long enough to know that the best philosophy is not the kind that sounds good. It is the kind that is true. Subscribe right now and hit the bell notification. We release these videos regularly, and every single one is built for people who are serious about understanding themselves. Subscribe now. Let us begin. Part 1. The biology that the Stoics would recognize. Let us begin with what is actually happening in the body. Because the Stoics were never people who ignored physical reality in favor of philosophical abstraction. They were deeply interested in the relationship between the body and the mind. And the biology of the older person's 3 a.m. waking is something they would have found not troubling, but genuinely fascinating. As the human body ages, the architecture of sleep changes in ways that are profound and poorly understood by most people who experience them. The deep, slow-wave sleep that dominates the early part of the night in younger people becomes shorter and lighter. The REM cycles, the periods of vivid, active, emotionally processing sleep, shift earlier in the night. The circadian rhythm, governed by the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain, advances, meaning the internal clock begins pushing wakefulness earlier and earlier. By the time a person reaches their 60s and 70s, waking between 2 and 4 in the morning is not unusual. It is, for many people, simply the new architecture of their sleep. The body is not malfunctioning. It is operating according to a biological timeline that has been shifting for decades. But here is what the purely biological explanation does not fully account for. And here is where Stoic psychology enters the conversation with something genuinely important to say. The 3 a.m. waking of the older person is not just earlier sleep termination. It is almost always accompanied by a specific quality of mental activity that distinguishes it entirely from the simple early waking of a tired body. The mind is active, often intensely so. The thoughts that arise in the 3 a.m. waking of an older person are not random. They are not the scattered, fragmentary impressions of a mind surfacing from deep sleep. They are coherent, persistent, often remarkably clear. They are the thoughts of a mind that has been working on something and that has surfaced into wakefulness because the work is not done. What is the work? That is the question. And the Stoic answer to that question is one of the most profound and most practically useful things this video has to offer. Part 2. What the Stoics understood about the aging mind. The Stoics had a specific and deeply respectful understanding of the aging mind that is almost entirely absent from contemporary culture. And understanding it is essential to understanding why 3 a.m. is not a problem for older people, but a signal. In the Stoic framework, the human life is not a story of peak and decline. It is not the arc that modern culture draws, the ascending line of youth, productivity, and capability followed by the descending line of diminishment, irrelevance, and eventual disappearance. The Stoics drew a completely different picture. They understood the life as a journey of deepening, of the progressive development of wisdom, perspective, and genuine self-knowledge that is simply not available to the young precisely because it requires what the young have not yet had: time, experience, loss, the full encounter with the complexity of human life that only years of genuine living can produce. Marcus Aurelius wrote with particular tenderness about the older person's relationship with time. Not with the anxiety of someone watching their supply diminish, but with the appreciation of someone who has learned, through long practice and genuine loss, that each moment is genuinely precious precisely because it is finite. Seneca, who wrote extensively about aging and who faced his own mortality with the clear eyes that his philosophy had trained, described the older mind as possessing something the younger mind simply cannot have: the view from far enough along the road to see the whole of it clearly. The young mind is inside the journey. It cannot see the shape of the path because it has not yet traveled enough of it. The older mind has the perspective that only distance provides. It can see patterns that were invisible from within them. It can recognize what genuinely mattered and what only appeared to matter. It can feel, with a vividness that is almost physical, the weight of what has been and the preciousness of what remains. And the Stoics understood that this perspective, this earned, hard-won, genuinely wise perspective, does not wait politely for convenient moments to make itself felt. It surfaces when the conditions allow it, when the noise of the day has quieted, when the social performance has ended, when the distractions that fill the daylight hours have retreated. It surfaces at 3 a.m. Part 3. The 5 things the 3 a.m. waking is saying. The 3 a.m. waking of the older person is not random. It is not meaningless biological noise. It is carrying specific content, specific messages, things that have been waiting for the quiet of the early morning to be heard with the clarity they deserve. These are the 5 most common and most important things that the 3 a.m. waking is saying to older people. And each one is addressed by Stoic philosophy with more precision and more genuine wisdom than any other framework available. The first message, your unlived life, is asking for attention. The first and most common message that the 3 a.m. waking carries for older people is the call of the unlived life. The things not yet done, the paths not yet taken, the creative work that was deferred, the conversation that was never had, the version of yourself that was set aside for practical reasons at some earlier point and that has been waiting patiently, persistently, for conditions to change. At 3 a.m., stripped of the busyness that the day provides, the unlived life becomes loud. It is not regret exactly, though it can feel like regret. It is more like a persistent, urgent, deeply personal recognition that there is still time, that the life is not over, that the things that were deferred are not necessarily lost. The Stoic response to this message is one of the most important things that Marcus Aurelius left in the Meditations. He wrote with striking urgency about the danger of deferring the genuine life to a future moment that may never arrive. He said, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." The 3 a.m. waking that carries the message of the unlived life is not a source of despair. It is an invitation. The Stoic hears it and asks, "What is this asking me to begin?" Not what did I miss? That question belongs to the past, which cannot be changed. But what is still available? What is still possible? What does the remaining time deserve? Because the Stoics understood, and older people who have genuinely lived know this in their bones, that the most genuine living is almost never the loudest or the most impressive. It is the most honest, the most aligned with the genuine values that all the years of experience have finally revealed clearly. The unlived life is not a condemnation. It is an invitation. Receive it. The second message, your unresolved relationships are asking to be addressed. The second message is the one that arrives with particular weight and particular clarity at 3 a.m. The people, the relationships, the connections that were damaged or lost or complicated in ways that were never fully resolved. The friend the distance grew between and neither of you crossed it. The family member the silence settled with and neither of you broke it. The love that ended without the closure that genuine respect would have offered. The child you wish you had been more present for. The parent you wish you had understood better before the chance was gone. These relationships surface at 3 a.m. because the older mind has the perspective and the urgency to recognize something the younger mind often does not. That time is actually finite. That the unresolved thing will not resolve itself. That the silence, left long enough, becomes permanent. The Stoic response is the one that requires the most courage and that produces the most genuine peace. It is the practice of justice in relationships, the recognition that every unresolved significant relationship is a form of incompleteness in your own inner life, not just in the relationship itself. Marcus Aurelius understood this with characteristic depth. He practiced what we might call philosophical repair, the deliberate, courageous, sometimes very late effort to address what had been left unaddressed, to speak what had been left unspoken, to offer what had been withheld too long, not because the other person would necessarily receive it well, not because the resolution was guaranteed, but because the genuine living of the remaining time requires the courage to attempt it. If 3 a.m. is bringing someone to your mind repeatedly, the Stoic philosophy is asking you a direct question. What would genuine justice look like in this relationship? And is there still time to offer it? In most cases, there is. The third message, your genuine wisdom, is asking to be shared. The third message is one that many older people feel acutely and act on too rarely. And it is one that the Stoics would consider one of the most important obligations of the person who has genuinely lived and genuinely learned. By the time a person has reached their 60s or 70s, they have accumulated something of extraordinary value. Not money necessarily, not status or position, something more durable and more genuinely useful. Wisdom, the specific, earned, embodied understanding of how life actually works that only genuine experience can produce. The knowledge of what genuinely matters and what only appears to matter. The understanding of what sustains through difficulty and what collapses under it. The perspective that comes from having lived through enough to know the patterns. At 3 a.m., this wisdom surfaces with a particular kind of urgency, a sense that it should not be wasted, that it has a purpose beyond the person who carries it, that somewhere, in a child, a grandchild, a younger person navigating the exact terrain the older person has already traversed, it could make an enormous difference. The Stoics considered the sharing of genuine wisdom one of the primary obligations of the philosopher. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire and still considered his primary purpose to be the modeling and sharing of genuine virtue. Epictetus taught until the end of his life. Seneca wrote letters with the specific intention of passing genuine wisdom to someone younger who was trying to navigate the same terrain. If 3 a.m. is waking you with the sense that what you know deserves to be shared, that the lessons of your life have value beyond you, the Stoic philosophy is not just inviting you to share them. It is telling you that sharing them is one of the most genuinely virtuous things available to you. Speak it. Write it. Tell the stories that carry the lessons. Not to perform wisdom, to offer it. Because the younger people in your life need exactly what you have. And the 3 a.m. urgency you are feeling about sharing it is one of the most honest signals your mind has generated in years. The fourth message, your relationship with mortality, is asking to be honest. The fourth message is the one that most people in our death-denying culture find most difficult to receive. And it is the one that the Stoics considered the most important message available to any human being, at any age, but especially in the later years when its relevance has become undeniable. Mortality, the finitude of the life, the awareness that is becoming more vivid and more insistent with each passing year that this specific, unrepeatable, genuinely precious experience of being alive will end. At 3 a.m., older people often encounter this awareness in its most unmediated form, without the buffer of busyness, without the comfortable distraction that the day provides, just the clear, honest, undeniable knowledge that time is genuinely limited and that what remains deserves to be lived with full awareness of that limitation. The Stoics were the most sophisticated philosophers of mortality that the Western tradition has produced, and their insight, the one that is genuinely transformative for every older person who receives it, is this: the awareness of death is not the enemy of genuine living. It is its most powerful catalyst. Marcus Aurelius returned to memento mori, the conscious remembrance of mortality, throughout the entirety of the Meditations. Not with despair, with gratitude, with the specific, vivid, philosophically grounded appreciation for each day that the honest awareness of its finitude makes possible. The 3 a.m. encounter with mortality is not a problem to be managed or a fear to be soothed. It is an invitation to the most honest and most fully alive engagement with the remaining time that is available to you. Receive it that way. Let it clarify rather than frighten. Let it focus rather than paralyze. Let the awareness that this is finite make each ordinary morning genuinely precious in the way that only the awareness of finitude can. The fifth message: your inner life is asking for the attention it deserved all along. The fifth and final message is perhaps the most tender, and it is the one that resonates most deeply with the specific quality of older people who have spent decades in the active, outward-facing, productivity-oriented mode that the world rewards and that the inner life often pays the price for. Many older people arrive at the later years with an inner life that has been significantly neglected, not from lack of intelligence or sensitivity, but because the demands of building a life, the career, the family, the practical architecture of existence, consumed the time and the attention that the inner life needed and rarely received. And at 3 a.m., in the silence that the aging body and the aging sleep architecture conspire to provide, the inner life asserts itself. The philosophical questions that were deferred, the genuine examination of values that was always going to happen when things settled, the honest confrontation with what the life has actually been and what it is actually for. The Stoics would welcome this assertion with open arms, because they understood, and every serious Stoic philosopher demonstrated through their own life, that the examined inner life is not a luxury for people who have nothing better to do. It is the foundation of everything genuinely good that a human life can produce. The 3 a.m. invitation to the inner life is not a symptom of too much time and not enough to do. It is the inner life claiming, finally, the attention it has always deserved. The philosophical space that the busyness of the productive years rarely permitted. Give it what it is asking for, not with anxiety, with genuine, philosophically grounded, deeply respectful attention to the most important landscape any human being ever has to navigate, your own interior world. At 3 a.m., finally quiet enough to be genuinely explored. Part 4. The Stoic practice for the 3 a.m. hour. For every older person who wakes at 3 a.m., I want to give you the specific Stoic practice that transforms this hour from a frustration into one of the most philosophically productive hours of your day. It has 3 parts, simple ones, designed for the specific quality of the 3 a.m. waking, the particular kind of mental clarity, the specific emotional availability, the genuine stillness that this hour offers. The first part, receive the waking without resistance. The first thing the Stoic practice asks you to do is perhaps the most counterintuitive. Do not fight the waking. Do not immediately reach for the strategies to return to sleep. Do not treat this moment as a malfunction requiring correction. Receive it. The Stoic practice of amor fati, the love of what is, applied to the 3 a.m. waking means acknowledging that this is the reality of this moment. This is what is happening. And what is happening always contains something worth attending to if you approach it with the right orientation. Lie still. Breathe. Let the initial disorientation of waking settle. And then ask, simply and honestly, what is here? What is present in this waking? What thought arrived first? What feeling is present in the body? What is the quality of this particular 3 a.m.? Receive it without immediately trying to make it stop. Because what you are receiving is not a malfunction. It is your own inner life, finally in the quiet that allows it to speak. The second part, listen with philosophical attention. The second part of the practice is the philosophical engagement with whatever the waking has brought. Using the 5 messages we explored earlier as a framework, ask, which of these is present tonight? Is this the unlived life asking for attention? A relationship asking to be addressed? Wisdom asking to be shared? Mortality asking for honest acknowledgement? Or the inner life claiming the attention it has always deserved? Name what is present, not with elaborate analysis. Simply and honestly, this is grief about a relationship. This is the creative work that I keep deferring. This is my awareness that time is genuinely limited. This is a question about what my life has been for. Naming is the beginning of the Stoic practice in every domain. The examination of the impression. The refusal to let the unnamed thing govern the inner life simply because it has not been seen clearly enough to be engaged with directly. Name it, and then ask the Stoic question that follows naming. What is genuinely in my power in relation to this? Not what can I control about it. Not how can I make this feeling stop. What is genuinely available to me here? What response, what action, what genuine philosophical engagement does this message deserve? The third part, rest in the present moment. The third part of the practice is the one that the Stoics would call the return to what is real. After the naming and the philosophical engagement, the practice is to rest, genuinely, deliberately, without resistance, in the present moment. Not in the past that the mind has been visiting, not in the future that the anxiety has been projecting. In this moment, this body, this breath, this specific, finite, genuinely precious moment at 3 a.m. in the life of a person who has lived long enough to know that moments like this are not interruptions of the genuine life. They are the genuine life, arriving, as it always does, in the ordinary, unremarkable present moment that is the only place where anything real ever happens. The Stoics called this the practice of the present, the discipline of confining the self to what is actually here rather than what was or what might be. And for the older person at 3 a.m., it is both the most difficult and the most rewarding of all the Stoic practices. Because the present moment at 3 a.m., genuinely inhabited by a person who has genuinely lived, is one of the most rich and most genuinely extraordinary moments available to a human being. It is full of everything the years have built: the love, the loss, the wisdom, the perspective, the specific quality of a person who has been genuinely alive long enough to know what that means. Rest there, in the quiet, in the dark, in the profound, philosophically rich, genuinely precious 3 a.m. of a life well and genuinely lived. If you are over 60 and you wake up at 3 a.m., your body is not failing you. It is finally telling you the truth. The truth that the inner life you have been carrying through all the decades of activity and productivity and obligation has things to say. That the wisdom you have accumulated deserves to be honored. That the relationships you have gathered deserve to be tended with the full attention that the busy years rarely permitted. That the mortality you are becoming increasingly honest with is not your enemy, but your greatest teacher. And that the remaining time, however much it is, deserves to be lived with the full philosophical engagement that the Stoics understood was the birthright of every human being who was serious enough to claim it. 3 a.m. is not the middle of the night. For the older person who approaches it with Stoic wisdom, it is the beginning of something. The beginning of the most honest, most examined, most genuinely alive portion of the day. The hour when the pretenses fall away and what is actually real is finally, fully, available to be seen. See it, receive it, honor it. If this video gave you something real, if it named something you have been experiencing without words, if it changed the way you understand what happens when you wake in the dark, please share it with someone who wakes at 3 a.m. and does not yet know what it means. With a family member who needs to understand what the older person in their life is experiencing. Leave a comment below telling me what your 3 a.m. is saying to you and what receiving it as a signal rather than a symptom has changed. I read every single comment, and I genuinely mean that. Subscribe to this channel right now if you have not already. Hit the bell notification. We release deep Stoic content regularly, and every video is built for people who are serious about the examined life at every age and every stage. 3 seconds. Subscribe now. Your 3 a.m. is not a problem. It is a conversation, one that has been waiting for you to be ready to have it. Thank you for being here. Take care of your minds. See you in our next video.